Hello friends, my name is Dr. Siddharth Jain and today we'll be studying the ECG. This video I'm making for the benefit of the undergraduate students, the MBBS, the BDS and other allied health students. In this video, we'll be studying the basics of the ECG and how to recognize the different patterns, how to find the rate, rhythm, how to detect the changes of the myocardial infarction, different types of blocks. So, what is a ECG? So, ECG is the average of the sum total of all the electrical activity that is going on in the heart. Our heart that contains millions and millions of cells, and in every cell there is an action potential happening. The direction of these action potential can be the vector, can be of any direction, and when we cancel out all these vectors, then we get what is called our ECG. So basically there are two phenomena, there are two electrical phenomena which are happening in our heart. That is, one is the impulse generation. So we know that the impulse generation occurs in the SA node, and this is the normal scenario which I am discussing. And then there is impulse conduction. The impulse gets conducted through fibers to the AV node and then to the bundle of the His into the right bundle branch and the left bundle branch. This is the left ventricle, left atrium, right atrium and right ventricle. If we see the heart, and electrically the heart is divided into two parts, the atria and the ventricles. Between the atria and the ventricles there is no zone of electrical conduction except for the AV node. The electricity can only pass through the AV node from the atria to the ventricles. The impulse generation occurs in the SA node, then it gets to the AV node and then bundle of His, and from the bundle of His to the Purkinje fibers to the right ventricle and left ventricle. So this is the impulse conduction and impulse generation. To record an ECG, we have to place electrodes. All of you must be familiar about how to record ECG. So we place electrodes in the limbs and in the chest. So we'll be discussing now about the placement of these electrodes. There are 12 leads which we take for an ECG. Out of them there are 6 limb leads and 6 chest leads. The 6 limb leads are 1, 2, 3, the VR, VL and VF. The graph we get in VR, VL and VF, that is very small to interpret. So the machine augments it and then we get the augmented VR, augmented VL and augmented VF. There are 6 chest leads, V1 to V6. So we get V1, V2, V3, V4, V5, V6. So in total we have 12 leads. How do we place these leads? If we see the axial representation of these leads, so this is the 0 degree. This is where we begin. Conventionally we can take this at any number, but conventionally we write this as 0 degree. Then this becomes a 90 degrees. This is 180 degrees. And this is 270 degrees. So this is the axial representation. Now we will be placing the leads, how the leads are placed. This is our heart. This is our heart. This is the right atrium. This is the left atrium. This is the right ventricle. This is the left ventricle. And from here all the electrical activities will be recorded in our ECG. So what is a lead? Lead is basically a camera which is looking at our heart, and it is looking at our heart from different angles. Different leads are looking at our heart from different angles. So at 0 degree we have the lead 1. At 60 degrees there is lead 2, and at 120 degrees we have lead 3. So remember, lead 1, lead 2 and lead 3, they are placed at 60 degrees from each other. At minus 30 degrees we have lead AVL. At 90 degrees we have lead AVF, and at 210 degrees we have lead AVR at 210 degrees. So to remember this, you can remember the Jesus standing like this with both arms spread out, and there is one leg. We place the leads on two legs, but one is for earthing. So basically only one leg is used for recording an ECG. By convention we take the right leg as earthing, but you can take either of the leg. Now this is lead 1 at 60 degree, lead 2 at 60 degree, lead 3 at 120 degrees. This is AVL at minus 30, AVF at 90 and AVR at 210 degrees. If we see, suppose at lead 1 we are getting this QRS complex. This QRS complex, the vector is traveling in this direction, and we are getting this QRS complex in lead 1. Then at 180 degree we will get the exactly opposite. We will get exactly opposite. So this we will get in lead at 180 degrees. So if we just reverse, we take the lead 1 printout and we just reverse it and see, that is how the ECG will be looking if there is a lead placed at 180 degrees. So understood? So now we have got cameras at every 30 degrees. Like if we reverse the AVR, so this is the reverse of the AVR. This is reverse of 1. Minus 60 degree is reverse of 3. 270 is reverse of AVF, and 240 degrees is reverse of lead 2. 150 degrees is reverse of AVL. So you can see we have placed a camera to look around the heart at every 30 degrees angle. Now this can look around the heart, but not anterior part of the heart, the anterior wall. We cannot look at the anterior wall with this. So to overcome that difficulty, we have put the chest leads. The chest leads are placed like this: lead V1, V2, V3, V4, V5 and V6. So as you can see, lead V1 and V2, they are looking at the right ventricle. The lead V3 and V4 it is looking at the septum and anterior wall of the heart, and lead V5 is looking at anterior wall and some part of the lateral wall, and lead V6 is looking at the lateral wall of the heart from left side. Understood? This diagram is very important to understand the ECG. So I am repeating it once again. To look around the heart, we have a lead placed at every 30 degrees. at every 30 degrees, but only 6 conventional we will be getting in the ECG paper, and others we can reverse and derive out. And to look at anterior wall of the heart, we have placed 6 chest leads: V1, V2, V3, V4, V5 and V6. I think I'm clear about this. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, so one doubt which is arising from the student is that we are only placing 4 leads in the limb, 4 electrodes in the limb, the only one in the left upper limb, one in the right upper limb, one in the left leg, and right leg I am saying that it is for earthing. So out of these 3, this is the setting which is done in the machine. They derive out all this. The solid lines, the dotted lines we have to reverse and see. The solid lines, the 6 1 2 3 AVR, AVL, AVF. Out of these 3 electrodes, the machine does this all the work. Is a setting in the machine which does this all the work. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Now if we have to look at the right atrium, which lead we will be seeing. If we want to look at the right atrium, we will be seeing the lead AVR. Okay, if we have to see the right ventricle, we will be seeing the lead V1 and V2. If we have to look at the septum, we will be looking at the lead V3 and V4. The anterior wall V2, V3, V4, V5, and the lateral wall V6, AVL 1 and 2. Okay, so suppose there is a lateral wall MI, there is a myocardial infarction in the lateral wall of the heart, then in which all leads we will be seeing the changes. We will be seeing changes in AVL 1, 2 as well as V5 and V6. We will be seeing changes in AVL 1, 2, V5, some part of V5 sometimes, and V6. There will be seeing changes in lateral wall MI. If there is an inferior wall MI, we will be seeing changes in lead 3, lead AVF and lead 2. Okay. So if there is a right ventricular infarction, I need not mention. If there is a right ventricular infection, we will be seeing changes in lead V1, V2 and lead 3. Okay. If there is a septal wall MI, in the septum there is change, then we will be seeing changes in the ECG in lead V3 and V4. And if there is an anterior wall MI, we will be seeing changes in lead V2, V3, V4 and V5 in anterior wall MI. So just remember this picture, try to make this picture yourself, and then you will understand the whole orientation of heart, and the very good amount of ECG you will understand with this. Okay. We can make combination also, like if there is an anterolateral wall MI, the changes will be seen from V2, V3, V4, V5, V6, AVL 1 and 2. We will be seeing changes in this in anterolateral wall MI. If there is an inferolateral wall MI, we will be seeing changes in lead 3, AVF 2, 1, AVL, V5 and V6. Okay. So now we will be moving to the ECG paper. To understand the rate, rhythm and other things, we need to see how the ECG paper looks like and what are the measurements in this ECG paper. If you look carefully the ECG paper, there is a large box, and in this large box there are 25 small boxes. Okay, there are in reality these all are equal. Okay, so the x-axis represents the time and the y-axis, this represents the voltage. We have to standardize the ECG like this. Normally the time, the speed of the ECG paper with which it has to run is 25 millimeters per second. At this speed the ECG paper runs through the machine. Okay, and if we take time, the horizontal axis, this small box, one small box, or we can say five large boxes, five small boxes, sorry. Okay, we'll start like this. One small box is equal to 0.04 seconds. In this axis, one small box is 0.04 seconds. So if we take five small boxes, in this timeline, that makes a one large box. Five small boxes will make one large box in x-axis, and that will be 0.04 into 5, that is 0.2 seconds. 0.2 seconds. Like this, if we take 25 small boxes, 25 small boxes like this, that will make 5 large boxes like this in x-axis, and that will be 1 second. So in 1 second the ECG papers runs 5 large boxes or 25 small boxes. If we have to make this 6 seconds, we have to multiply all by 6, that is 30 large boxes, and that is 150 small boxes. This is the 6 seconds. The conventional ECG we take around 10 seconds, so this is 6 seconds we are taking. If we have to take 1 minute, that is 60 seconds, that comes as 300 large boxes or 1500 small boxes. So in 1 minute we get 300 large boxes. So this is about the x-axis. The y-axis, one small box is equal to 0.1 millivolt, and 10 small boxes is equal to 2 large boxes is equal to 1 millivolt. So this is the standardization of the ECG. The ECG paper has to run at 25 millimeters per second, and the amplitude has to be set at 1 millivolt. That is the standardization of ECG. In every ECG paper it is written. So before checking the ECG, we should always check about the standardization of the ECG. Now I am making the large boxes, only the large boxes. Okay, now suppose we are getting a QRS in every large box. There is a QRS complex which is happening in every large box. So 1 minute, I told you, 60 seconds has 300 large boxes. So every large box has got a QRS, that means the heart rate will be 300. So just see, there are between the two are how many large boxes are there. Divide that number by 300 and you will get your heart rate, if the heart rate is regular. So if there is a QRS complex, if there is a QRS complex in every two large boxes you are getting a QRS complex, then the heart rate will be 300 by 2, that is 150, and so on. If a QRS complex is there in every three large box, there is a between the RR, between two R there are three large boxes, then the heart rate will be 300 by 3, that is 100. If there are between two RR there are four large boxes, then heart rate will be 300 by 4, that is 75, and so on. 300 by 5, that is 60. 300 by 6, that is 50. So that is how you can calculate the heart rate just by looking at the ECG, just by looking at how many large boxes are there between two QRS complexes, if the heart rate is regular. If the heart rate is irregular, there is an irregular rhythm. We cannot say at between here, if you take the heart rate will become 300, if you take like this the heart rate will become around 150. So you cannot determine what is the heart rate. Then you first count 30 large boxes, 30 consecutive large boxes you have to count, and then you have to see how many QRS complexes are there in those 30 large boxes. So suppose in 30 large boxes you get 10 QRS complexes, then you multiply that by 10. In 1 minute we have 300 large boxes. In 30 large boxes, if there are 10 QRS complexes, then in 1 minute we will be having 10 into 10, the heart rate will be around 100 per minute. Understood? So very easy to understand how to calculate heart rate by looking at the ECG, if the heart rate is regular and if the heart rate is irregular. Now we'll be studying the different waveforms, how they are formed and what is the physiology behind these different waveforms. So this is a normal ECG. We can see there is a P wave, there is a Q wave, there is an R, S, T and U waves. So this is the normal ECG which we see. Okay. Now we will correlate it with the cardiac cycle, or with how these waveforms are formed. So this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium, this is the right ventricle, this is the left ventricle. SA node. When the SA node fires, the first chamber of the heart to contract is the right atrium. The impulse gets conducted from here to the right atrium. It spreads throughout the right atrium and depolarizes the right atrium, which makes the initial P wave, the first half of the P wave, is the contraction of the right atrium. Then I told you there is a no go from here to here. The impulse then gets conducted easily to the left atrium, and the left atrium gets depolarized. The left atrium contracts, and that makes the second part of the P wave, that is the contraction of the left atrium, second part of the P wave, that is left atrial contraction. Now there is an AV node, and we all know there is a AV nodal delay. There is an AV nodal delay which makes this segment. This is the AV nodal delay. Okay, then from here through the bundle of his normal axis of the heart is towards the left ventricle, because the left ventricle has maximum amount of muscles. So when all the vectors cancel out, this is the normal cardiac axis we get at 60 degrees, because this direction has maximum number of action potential which balance out all other action potentials. So this is the towards this our heart goes. So if you see lead 2, normally if you see lead 2, that will have the maximum height of the QRS complex. So here is the bundle of his. The action potential spreads from left to right side of the bundle of his. From the left to right side it spreads in the bundle of his, and that is why it is going away from lead 2. It is going away from lead 2, and we get a small q. We get a very small q here because it is going away from the normal cardiac axis. So that is the bundle of his depolarization, and from here there is an right ventricular depolarization and left ventricular depolarization. This occurs simultaneously, which gives us the RS complex, that is the ventricular depolarization. The ST segment, in this ST segment the ventricles are maximally activated. They are maximally activated. There is a maximum contraction which is happening in this ST segment. This is a very important segment. And then when the ventricles relax, we get a T wave. This is the ventricular relaxation or repolarization. Sometimes we also can get a U wave, but that is not always present in ECG. If there is a lot of bradycardia, then we can get U waves. So now we can ask, where is the atrial repolarization here? The atrial repolarization also occurs, but that is masked by the very large QRS. Very large QRS masks the atrial repolarization, and hence we do not get that atrial repolarization in our conventional ECG. So this is the normal ECG, and how is this made? Okay, so now we'll be seeing this picture a bit detailed about the various segments and intervals. Okay, so this is, we know this is the P wave, this is the Q, this is the R, S and T. So from the starting of the P wave to the starting of Q wave, from the starting of the P wave to the starting of the Q wave, we have PR interval. This is PR interval. Okay, this is the P wave, this is the PR interval, and from the end of the P wave to the start of the Q wave, we have PR segment. This is the PR segment. So P wave is the atrial depolarization. Initial part is the right atrial depolarization. The later part of the P wave is the left atrial depolarization. The PR segment is the AV nodal delay, and remember this PR segment, we take this as the baseline. This is the baseline of the ECG. And from the starting of the P wave to the starting of the QRS, that is the PR interval. Now the QRS, from the starting of the Q to the end of the S, this is QRS segment, and this is the ventricular depolarization. Ventricular depolarization, and ventricular depolarization occurs till the start of the T wave. So till this we have the ventricular depolarization from the starting of the Q wave to the start of the T wave. Okay, this segment is ST segment. ST segment, and in this ST segment, it is the interval between the depolarization and repolarization of the ventricles. The interval between the depolarization and repolarization of ventricles is called as ST segment, and here the ventricles are maximally activated. The T wave, this is the T wave, this is the ventricular repolarization. Now from the start of the Q, from the start of the Q to the end of the T, we have got QT interval. QT interval. From the beginning of the Q to the end of the T, we have got QT interval. Okay. This is the heart. As we have discussed, we know this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle, and the depolarization, it spreads from SA node to AV node to the bundle of his fast conducting bundle of his fibers, and the right ventricle, right bundle branch, and left ventricle, left bundle branch. This is a electrically neutral zone. Now pre-excitation syndromes. What happens in pre-excitation syndromes? That there is an extra pathway exists which connects the atria to the ventricles, and this extra pathway, it conducts the electricity before, because AV node has the property of delaying the electrical conduction. So when you don't get the delay, the ventricles get depolarized before they should depolarize. So this is called as pre-excitation syndromes, and in this pre-excitation syndrome there will be the PR interval will be shortened, because the ventricles they will get depolarized early, and hence the PR interval will get shortened, and we call this short PR interval, or the pre-excitation syndromes. With the, for example, we can see WPW syndrome and LGL syndrome. So these are the examples of pre-excitation syndromes where there is a separate channel exists for conduction of electricity from the atrium to the ventricles apart from the AV node, and that is why the ventricles get depolarized early, because there is no delay in this channel. The delay is there in AV node, and hence the PR interval gets shortened, the QRS becomes early, the PR interval will become shortened, and this is called as the pre-excitation syndromes. Now we come to the rhythm of the ECG. Okay, so when the sinus node, sinoatrial node or the sinus node is firing, we call this as sinus rhythm. And in sinus rhythm there will be a P wave and then followed by QRS and then T. So this is how we get a sinus rhythm. This is the normal sinus rhythm. What happens if the sinus node stops firing? If it is diseased and it stops firing, then the next, if the SA node stops firing, the AV node will take up its role and it will fire. Normally what happens is these all keeps on firing, like the sinus node keeps on firing, the AV node also tries to fire, then the other channels, they also wants to fire. Every time they want to fire, but once from the sinus node the electricity comes, they do not get the chance to fire and they conduct the electricity from which is coming from the sinus node. Now if the sinus node is diseased and there is no signal coming from the sinus node, the AV node, it will start firing, and we know that the rate of firing of SA node is around 72 per minute. The AV node is around 50 to 60 per minute. And then if it comes in this Purkinje fibers, here it will be around 30 to 40 per minute, or there 20 to 30 per minute. So these are the different rates at which they will fire. Since SA node fires maximal, so that is why it fires first and everything else stop firing any action potential. So if the SA node is not firing, AV node will take up its role and AV node will fire, and in that case, since in that case there will be no P wave, we will not see any P wave. There will be a QRS followed by T, and this is called as AV nodal rhythm. AV nodal rhythm, or also known as junctional rhythm. This is known as junctional rhythm because it is at the junction, so it is called as junctional rhythm. Now we see that AV node will fire and the action potential is spreading downwards, but it can also spread upwards. Sometimes it can also spread upwards, and in that case we can see a downward P wave, negative P wave after QRS complex. So there are two types of junctional rhythm we can see. One is the normal with no P wave, or next is the a P wave which is reverse in direction. The reverse P wave after the QRS, this can also happen in junctional rhythm. Next is sinus arrhythmia. In young people, or in certain conditions, what happens is with breathing the heart rate changes, and that shows up in ECG. When the changes are more, it shows up in ECG. There is a P wave, there is a QRS, there is a T wave. And sometimes there is a long pause and then this will start. So the RR interval varies, but it is again P followed by QRS followed by T, and this sinus rhythm, we call this as sinus arrhythmia. What is the normal heart rate? The normal heart rate, I've told you, is 72, but it can vary from 60 to 100. Some textbook mention as 50. From 60 to 100 it can vary if we take a range. So if it is less than 60, the heart rate is less than 60, there's a P wave followed by QRS followed by T, and all the RR intervals are at regular interval. We call this as sinus bradycardia. If it is more than 100, there is a P followed by QRS followed by T, and the heart rate is more than 100, we call this as sinus tachycardia. Then we saw the junctional rhythm, where there is no P wave or a reverse P wave after the QRS. Normal sinus rhythm, that is the normal, and there can be sinus arrhythmia. So these are the different types of rhythms which I am mentioning. Next, see, there are tachycardias. Tachycardias, which can, the pathology can be there supraventricularly. Supraventricularly means SA node, AV node, or in the atrium. So this is called as tachycardias when the pathology is supraventricularly. And supraventricular tachycardias, the QRS complexes are narrow. The QRS complexes are narrow. So we also call them as narrow complex tachycardias. Narrow complex tachycardias, when the QRS complexes are narrow, less than 3 small boxes, then we call them as narrow complex tachycardias. For example, atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter. So these are the examples of narrow complex tachycardias. Multifocal atrial tachycardia. Now next is ventricular tachycardias. Ventricular tachycardias. When the pathology is below the AV node, in the ventricles below the AV node, we call them as, and there is tachycardia, we call them as ventricular tachycardias. For example, ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation. So these are also called as broad complex tachycardias. Broad complex tachycardias because the QRS we get here, they are more than 3 small boxes. They are more than 3 small boxes, and that is why we call them as broad complex tachycardias. Now one by one I have discussed till junctional rhythm. Now I will discuss atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, and multifocal atrial tachycardia, the narrow complex tachycardias. What happens in atrial fibrillation is that the sinus node is not firing because somewhere in a musculature, in the musculature of the atria, there arises a focus which starts firing the action potentials. So it starts firing the action potential at different levels. it starts firing the action potentials somewhere in the musculature of the atrium. Somewhere in the musculature of the atrium, they start firing this, and they start firing this in a bizarre manner. So atria cannot contract in a systematic way. How it was happening, it is not able to contract like that. It is fibrillating. It fibrillates, and that is why we did not get any P wave in the ECG. There is no P wave. Okay. Or we can sometimes get a fibrillating P wave if we look carefully or do some further electrophysiological studies, but normally there is no P wave. There are QRS complexes followed by T, and again there are QRS complexes followed by T. So the RR interval varies. The RR interval, it varies between two complexes, and there are no P waves. This is the T wave. There are no P waves which is preceding the QRS complexes. The height of QRS complexes is also different. So because ventricles, before they completely relax, another fire comes from the atrium, and then whatever blood it has or whatever muscles are able to contract, they contract, and that is why the height of the QRS complexes also varies in atrial fibrillation. So in atrial fibrillation there will be no P waves. Okay, the RR interval varies, and the amplitude of R is variable. So that is how we recognize the atrial fibrillation, and remember, this is a narrow complex tachycardia. Next we come to atrial flutter. This is atrial fibrillation which we were discussing. In atrial fibrillation, the atrial rate is around 400 to 600. This is the atrial rate in atrial fibrillation. In atrial flutter, AFib, the atrial rate will be around 300. So atrial rate will be around 300, and some of the P waves will be conducted, some will not be conducted. So 1 P wave, 2 P wave, 3 P wave, and there is a QRS complexes T, then P, QRS complexes, and T. So some of the P waves are conducted to the ventricles, and other P waves are not conducted to the ventricles, and they give the appearance of sawtooth. So this is called as sawtooth appearance. In atrial flutter, P waves are present. There are multiple P waves, and few of the P waves gets conducted to the ventricle. The RR interval will be regular. So in atrial fibrillation we get P waves are present, and the P waves will be around 300 per minute, which gives a sawtooth appearance. some of the P waves gets conducted and produce the QRS complexes. So then we get the RR interval will be regular. RR interval will be regular. So this is the atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter. Sometimes we see ECGs where the RR interval is irregular, P waves are present. This is a P wave. This is a P wave. So we see ECGs where P waves are present, RR interval is irregular, and the P wave morphology is different. Every P wave will be of different morphology, means there are many focuses in the atrium which is firing, and we call this as multifocal atrial tachycardia. Multifocal atrial tachycardia. So we discussed three types of supraventricular tachycardias. Apart from the sinus tachycardia, we have got the atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, and multifocal atrial tachycardias. All these are narrow complex tachycardias with the origin is supraventricularly, that is SA node, AV node, or in the atrium. Okay, so now we come to the ventricular tachycardias. As we discussed, in ventricular tachycardias we have number one is VT, ventricular tachycardia. It can be of two types. One is monomorphic VT or polymorphic VT. As you can understand, if the action potential is arising from ventricle, there will be no P wave. So, and it is a broad complex tachycardia. So there will be no P wave. There will be only broad complex QRS complexes, and the T will be merged with the QRS complexes. So this is how a monomorphic, all the morphologies are similar, the monomorphic VT looks like. Next comes the polymorphic VT. Polymorphic VT, there will be gradually it will increase and then decrease, there will be a pause, and again the same things will start. This is called as polymorphic VT, and this is also known as torsades des pointes. Torsades des pointes. This is the polymorphic VT, this is the monomorphic VT. Ventricular fibrillation, if we see, there will be bizarre QRS complexes, and it is a very acute emergency. All the VTs are acute emergencies. So there will be bizarre QRS complexes, and this is called as ventricular fibrillation. The ventricle is fibrillating, and there is very less or no amount of blood which is getting conducted from the aorta to the body, because the ventricle is not contracting properly how it should contract. It is fibrillating and the blood is not going through, and it is a very acute emergency. So we have discussed all the tachycardias. One more is there, is junctional tachycardia. It is also a type of supraventricular tachycardia. It will look like a sinus tachycardia with an absent P wave. There will be no P wave. There will be QRST, 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 and there will be tachycardias. It is called as junctional tachycardia. Now we come to extrasystoles or ectopics. Sometimes in ECG we see some kind of extrasystoles or ectopics like this. There is an early P wave. There is an early P wave. Then there is a narrow complex, narrow QRS, then T, and it is followed by a normal P, QRS, T. So this is a narrow complex. The QRS is not wide, it is narrow. There is a P followed by QRS which is narrow, followed by T. This is known as atrial ectopic or atrial extrasystole. If we see there is no P wave, there is a wide QRS, and then so we see this kind. This is a ventricular ectopic or ventricular extrasystole. So these are the extrasystoles which we can see in ECG. Now if in an ECG if we see normal one complex, then a ventricular extrasystole wide complex without P, and then again we see normal ECG. Again this is happening regularly, one normal PQRST and then ventricular extrasystole, then again PQRST, again ventricular extrasystole, 1:1. This we call as ventricular bigeminy. Ventricular bigeminy. If we see two normal PQRST followed by one ventricular extrasystole, again two normal PQRST followed by one ventricular extrasystole, this is 1:1, that is 2:1, and we will call this as ventricular trigeminy. So bigeminy, one normal, one extrasystole, one normal, one extrasystole. Trigeminy, there will be two normal, one extrasystole, two normal, one extrasystole. So that is ventricular trigeminy. Next we come to heart blocks. I can understand that these rhythms and blocks, understanding them can be a bit boring, but you should understand them so that we can give better care to our patients. Next is the heart blocks. Heart blocks can occur at various levels. Okay, it can occur at SA node. We call it as SA nodal exit block. It can occur in AV node and bundle of His. We will call them as first degree, second degree, third degree heart blocks. And this can happen in the left bundle branch. We call them as left bundle branch block, or right bundle branch. We can call it as right bundle branch block. Also, left bundle branch again divides into anterior fascicle and posterior fascicle. So Here we can call, if it is a block here, we can call it as left anterior hemiblock. If it is a block in posterior fascicle, we can call it as left posterior hemiblock. So we'll be studying these in detail now. SA nodal exit block, again at this level, at undergraduate level, it is not so important. So we will go directly to the AV nodal blocks, that are the first degree blocks. First degree AV nodal block. In first degree block, the PR interval is prolonged. The PR interval, normal PR interval, we can say it is 0.12 to 0.22 milliseconds. Okay, so 0.12 to 0.22 milliseconds is the normal PR interval. If it is by old age, it will become 0.20, but in young it is 0.12 to 0.22. If the PR interval is more than 0.22 small boxes, then we call that first degree AV block, and in this all the waves will have prolonged PR interval, the same PR interval, all the P's will be conducted into QRS complexes. So there is a PR interval is prolonged and it is conducted into QRST. Same will be happening. The PR interval is same, prolonged but same in all the complexes. All the P's will be conducted into QRSS complexes. This is the first degree AV block. In second degree AV block, we have two types: Mobitz type 1 and Mobitz type 2. Second degree AV block, we have Mobitz type 1, Mobitz type 2. Type 1 is also known as Wenckebach phenomenon. So what happens in Wenckebach phenomenon? There is a progressive widening of the PR interval until 1P is not conducted, and again same thing starts. So there is a progressive increase in PR interval until one of the P is not conducted at all. 1P, after that there is no QRS, and again this same cycle will start. There will be progressive lengthening of the QR interval, 1P will not be conducted, then again same thing will start. This is called as Wenckebach phenomenon or Mobitz type 1 second degree AV nodal block. In Mobitz type 2 block, we have 2:1, 3:1 like this. Means this represents the P and this represents the QRS. There are two P's. There is two P's for one QRS complex. So we call it as 2:1 second degree 2:1 second degree Mobits type 2 block. If there will be 3P and 1 QRS, we will call it as 3:1 Mobits type 2 second degree AB block. Understood? So Mobits type 2 can be 2:1, 3:1, 4:1 like this. For every two P waves there is one QRS wave, it is 2:1. If for every 3P there is one QRS, then we will call it as 3:1 block. So this is Mobits type 2 block. Now we will come to third degree AB block. Third degree AB block is also known as complete heart block or idioventricular rhythm or complete AV dissociation. All are same things, means there is no association between the atrium and the ventricles. The ventricle has become idiot and the atrium is firing at its own pace. There is no relation between PQRS and T. There is no relation between PQRS and T. Ventricle is firing at its own. The atria is firing at its own. So this is called as complete heart block. Now next we come to the left bundle branch block and the right bundle branch block. So if there is a conduction delay in the bundle branches, okay, we have to see the important leads, that is lead V1 and lead V6 here. Lead V1 and lead V6 here. If the force of QRS in the lead V1, if the force of QRS in lead V1 is above the baseline, it will be wide complex. Number one, it will be wide complex because there is a block at the ventricular level, and force of QRS in V1 is above the baseline, and in V6 it is below the baseline. It can be like this also, means, but maximum portion is above the baseline, and here it can be like, but maximum portion, maximum force, if we take this height and this height, this is more than this. The below part in V6 is more than the above part. So this is the right bundle branch block. Right bundle branch block. In left bundle branch block, the opposite happens. In lead V1, the maximum force will be below the baseline, and in lead V6, the maximum force will be above the baseline. So that is how we differentiate between right bundle branch block and left bundle branch block for this is the mnemonic for this William. Okay, so W will come first, V1 will come first in left bundle branch block, and W pattern will come first and M pattern will come later in left bundle branch block, and For right bundle branch block, the mnemonic is marrow. So in right bundle branch block, the M pattern will come first in lead V1 and W pattern will come next in V6. So William Marrow is the mnemonic to remember the left bundle branch block and right bundle branch block. I hope you have understood till here the rhythms, the hard blocks, different kind of asystoles and the basics of the ECG. Next we will be going to the most important and most interesting part, that is the ischemic heart disease or the myocardial infarction. The myocardial infarction. So before this we'll be seeing the three types of ischemic heart diseases, acute emergencies, that are the ACS, acute coronary syndromes. So all of you must be aware that there are three types of acute coronary syndromes. Number one is the ST elevation MI, number two is the non-ST elevation MI, and number three is unstable angina. The basic pathology in ST elevation MI is that there is complete occlusion of the blood vessel. There is complete occlusion of the blood vessel. We don't have time. We have to establish the circulation by either thrombolysis or passing a stent. In non-ST elevation MI, there is near complete occlusion. There is a near complete occlusion, so we have to put a stent or give treatment for this to reduce this block. In unstable angina, as you know, there is vasospasm. The blood vessels, there is spasm of the blood vessels that causes the unstable angina or Prinzbitt's angina. Now, what will be the changes in these syndromes? So this is a blood vessel which is supplying blood to a part of the myocardium. This is the part of myocardium to which there is blood supply. Now, when this supply is interrupted, if there is a complete occlusion, the blood supply has been interrupted to this part of myocardium. So, which tissue will be affected the most? There can be some circulation from other small blood vessels here, but the maximum burden, maximum brunt of this occlusion will be borne by the innermost myocardial cells. This is the dead zone. This dead zone is represented in MI as a big Q wave. So this is the dead zone. The war is happening here. All the soldiers here are dead. So there is no point of saving these soldiers. Now the real battle is happening in this zone. The soldiers are fighting. They are fighting for survival, and we have to save them by reinforcing this blood supply. So the soldiers are fighting here, they are injured but they are not dead, and we have to save them. So this segment is represented by ST segment, ST elevation. The ST elevation, if there are lot of injured cells, the height of ST will be more. If there are less injured cells, then height of ST will be decreased. What happens if you don't start the circulation, if you don't remove this clot, what will happen? All this will come into dead zone. Everything will be dead here. Everyone will be dead here. So we have to save this zone. Okay, so this is represented by the ST elevation, and this is the outermost zone. The outermost zone, the cells, their soldiers, they are preparing to go for the fight. When these soldiers will die, these soldiers will start fighting, they will start getting injured, they will start dying. So we have to save them as well. But priority is this. Priority is the ST segment. But this is also our priority, and this is represented by inverted T wave. Inverted T wave. Normally the T is upright, but these are frightened soldiers, and they are they are preparing to go to battle, and so it is represented by the inverted T waves. So if there are no dead cells means just now MI has happened. Just now MI has happened, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. There will be Q wave will not be there. There will be just ST elevation. And if the MI is old, 2 days, 3 days, and you have not given the circulation, there will be a big Q wave. All the soldiers are dead. There is a big Q wave. The ST segment, there are no injured soldiers now. The ST segment will be normal. So we have to make Q as small as possible, and we have to decrease the ST segment as soon as possible. So that is the idea, to start the recirculation as soon as possible. Every second there are thousands of cells which are dying, and we have to save them so that patient's future is secure. Not only his life, but his future is secure. His functioning, left ventricular functioning is normal. There are no further complications which happens after MI. So this is the changes we see in ST segment elevation MI. Now what happens in non-ST elevation MI? Non-ST elevation MI. In non-ST elevation MI, there is a blood supply which is not totally interrupted. It is not totally interrupted. There is a clot here, near total 90-95% occlusion, but some cells are coming. So some blood supply is coming. Some blood supply is coming. So there are not dead soldiers. There are all injured soldiers, and they are all frightened soldiers that we will die soon. So this will be represented in ECG as ST segment depression. The ST segment depression and T inversion. So we will see this kind of ECG in non-ST elevation MI. In unstable angina, you will see intermittent ST elevation or non-ST elevation depending upon the spasm. Intermittent chest pain. If you do the angiography, there will be no block. It will be normal, but there will be spasms. So this completes our understanding of ECG. Any problems, if you are having any questions, any doubts, you can send a message to me and I will try to